a lot of bad habits and a lot of good ideas. But things I want to talk about are like safe shots and unsafe shots. Some people call them like high percentage shots, like the really deep, like I'm going to wrap all the way around them, but the high percentage part, I think, is that I'm going to hit them. You got to find a way to do it in more of a safe manner. Doing smaller shots and tighter shots won't be as impressive, and you won't get the kill as fast, but if you can stay safe, you can get the kill in the end, I think. A popular shot is just a chop. Whenever I chop to the outside, usually what's open is
the inside.
So a modified version of the chop, the way that you can return quicker, is that if I throw an outside chop, just like so, I turn my hand in, just slightly, and it closes down that whole lane. If I throw a shot to the inside, I tuck my hand out, and it closes down that whole lane. I mean, chops to the inside are hard, because when I throw a shot here, his other sword's there, but just as an example.
Well, what I noticed during that was that there's a lot of times when you're throwing your chainsaw, throw a shot, and then you bring your elbow all the way back and try to catch a block, or maybe they throw a shot and you block here and then start throwing like that. It'll increase the length of your shot, which means the shot's going to take longer to get where you want it to go. So if you keep your hand out and you catch the block early, because, I mean, Florentine, you got to catch the swords early. You want to cut off as many angles as possible. It's easier to do this with the sword off your body. So really quick pot shots like this are fine as long as you recognize that at the end of the shot, you're blocking something, okay? If I throw it here, I can block the inside like that. He said if I throw it like this, I can block the outside like that. That's really good stuff, and that's pretty much what you want to do all the time. Ideally, personally, I like to get to the inside lane as much as possible. So if I can throw a shot where I can anticipate some sort of return, if I throw outside here and get him to throw inside, I now have access to outside, but it's the other way too. If I can throw a quick pot shot to the inside, get him to throw out, I can come in. Okay, my objective is to somewhere get inside this box, created from the shoulders to the hips and around. That's where I like to be. It's where I like most of my shots to go. So when I throw a shot, I want to think about where my hand is in space and how can I block a shot from wherever I finish. So if I throw one of these really deep rafts or something, what can I block from back here? Not a damn thing, right? I don't want my hand to be way out here, way out of position. Because, you know, if he turns into it and has his arm out of the way or blocks it, I am screwed, okay? So it's just something to keep in mind when you're fighting. When you throw a shot, think of what you can block from wherever your hand ends in space.
Agreed. So people used to talk back in the day about like you're safe in the house, and that was to block basically all the outside lanes before there was even terminology to talk about the inside and the outside. So you'd see a lot of people fight kind of like this, and people would get stabbed a lot. And sure, they wouldn't get shot to the outside, and it was just a style of protection. Now, I sort of keep my hands in a little circle right here. I call it like the circle of protection, even when I throw my shots. Because whenever I'm standing here, instead of throwing my shot real wide out here like this, my hand is outside that circle of protection. And if I don't capitalize on that shot, I'm pretty screwed. But the circle extends slightly bigger whenever I go out. So if I'm sitting here and I throw this shot, my hand is still kind of in that circle, and it's easier for me to return. So just like with any fighting anything, everybody says return to guard, and that's what I'm trying to emphasize in this class too, because I see a lot of people throw a lot of wild shots and unsafe shots, like standing here like this and throwing the super stab. It might hit, it might not, but my hand is way down here, and I am only relying on one hand at this point. So instead of doing something crazy like that, it might be better just to throw small chops until you get to the advantage where you can come in. You bring up a good point. Like, I was going to talk about combos and shots and stuff like that. I like this class to be a little bit more theory than drills. I think that's more like a basics class. But a couple of good setup and returns is just you can do any setup and return as long as you're aware where you're open. Like, if I know I'm going to be open to the inside after throwing an outside shot, it's easy to bring your hand in here and then return back out. Same thing with, I trigger a lot of shots, especially people who I think are rat trappers, or who people are just like, I'm going to swing as soon as you get into range. Standing out of range, and you pop the hand right here, which elicits a shot out here, and then return. A good thing I think the Florentine does that you can do kind of like a boxer is you can mask footwork. You can mask setup shots and stuff like that. You can do that simply by dipping and moving your hands. Like, if he wasn't paying attention, I've taken 3 steps since we started. I can hit him in the shoulder. Because right here, it's just simple little like dodge dips, little dives and stuff like that, and now I'm a lot closer. I started here, I ended here just by dipping, diving, and swaying my hands. Chops also help you out a lot. Whenever people stand real close, you can tie up their whole sword. And as long as you're throwing chops, and I guess I'll talk about chops here in a second, but as long as you're throwing chops in a safe manner, here he doesn't have any options. And if he's limited on options, he's going to do something desperate. And when somebody does something desperate, it usually is bad for them. Because if I sit here and I just close him off, he's going to have to like go crazy and like all the way around. It's like, no. So, range control is really important in Florentine too. I think you can't just stand toe-to-toe with people like you do with a shield. There's not enough passive defense. It just becomes like some kind of weird street ball flat fight. So I keep a pretty good range. I think you guys do too, because you're primarily Florentine fighters. But so you gotta utilize smaller steps. I saw a lot of you guys doing a lot of lunges and a lot of coup de grace shots, like really trying to get in there and get the shot. I think you can control a lot of distance with the addition with the jabs and the hands, with the smaller little steps here, here, and here. And then wait for the big one and go. Do you have any drills or something? People itch. Questions? Anybody?
I just get people used to taking steps. Like smaller steps. A lot of people aren't used to actually taking that. Like, when it comes to stepping against opponents, I personally, unless they switch hands and switch forward feet, don't like to bring my rear hip forward and pivot. A lot of people like to do that to close, but I think it squares up my torso too much with them. It makes me stab bait. This is one of the reasons why I hand match, because it's easier to deflect stabs, and it keeps the fight pretty much on one side. So when I'm stepping, I like to maintain that profile. So I come in, but nothing's changing. I'm not pivoting for this crazy lunge unless I really want to go deep. If I really want to go deep and come all the way around, I really have to commit to it, throw wide or throw under. I don't recommend doing that when you're trying to close, because you will probably get stabbed.
Yeah, you can mask that kind of footwork again with the jab, like, because I usually do it against sword and borders. I never do it against the Florentine, I don't think. Because like when they have one sword there, you can definitely jab, and then come over.
You just got to time up and keep their focus up high so you can mask what you're doing down. Okay. There's a lot of misdirection that comes in.
Going off of that particular thing, I always found it was, along with masking your approach and locking them up upstairs when you come in, I always found instead of taking the Florentine versus Florentine, I noticed I just like to, I'll get in just a little bit closer, drop my weight a little bit, and just throw to their outside hip if I'm going to step that way. So I don't have to take a full step if I don't need to. That was not an aggression.
Could you show us?
Sure.
I don't know if I fully understood what you said.
Oh, look, sword. Sure. Instead of reaching for the back hip with a full step like this, which is fine, I'd much rather confuse them up here and distract them and use this direction, and just come a little bit closer than.
Okay. You like to be really close. Okay.
Yeah, I like to jam out lanes too, like you did with your sword. You can definitely, I mean, a sword has a path because it's so long. Whenever they're standing, I do it to sword and borders more than I do other Florentine fighters, but whenever you see your options here, you can definitely play with the tip of their sword and then force them to a single lane. You can also do it with the cross sword, especially, I was doing it to somebody earlier, I can't remember her name, but a very aggressive denial guard, and then when you push the sword over here, it takes that sword away, forces them to go to the other side, and you have options. Just something to think about, just something to give you an idea of. But, yeah, I really wish I was running those. It'll come back to me.
Any questions? It's 1:44.
Thank you. Can we have until 2:30? Have class and gone? Trying to think. So when I fight Florentine versus Florentine, I usually attack the forward quadrant because that's what I'm closest to. So whenever I'm attacking, I usually try to get something with that arm. That's a very popular shot. Oh, I was going to talk about chops. And so I'm sure everybody knows since this is advanced class. I like to think there's 3 different chops. There's the hammer strike, there's the drummer strike, and then there's the backhand. Which that was a rhyme, sorry. There's the backhand. There it is. They all have their uses. Mostly it's this differentiation of angle, because I think they're all about equally strong. A good way to practice chops, and I was telling this in my basic Florentine class, is to shadow box them. Keep your elbow in, kinda, and you bring your sword up 90 degrees, and then all the way down to 0 degrees, and then back up. So it's just, you sit here and you just chop. And it's not swinging your arm. You keep your elbow pretty much tucked in, and it's just wrist chops. I tell my squires to do it like about 40 or 50 times slow, then pick it up, and then go real fast until they've done it 100 times, and I make them do 10 sets of that. If you just practice this like 2 or 3 times a week, if you can, until you get there, you can build up that forearm strength that gives you that tip control that everybody needs. Because when you throw a chop to the shoulder, it's really awesome when you don't hit them in the face. After you build up your forearm chops there, if you go to like a door in your house and just open it up, or beam or whatever you have, right there, you can throw chops here as a exercise. Because bringing your sword up high enough to throw a chop is really good when you're trying to hit shoulder and shoulder instead of shoulder, face, shoulder. And with the added tip control, I think you get a lot more advantages in Florentine, because a lot of people jut out and block only with their pommel, but you can intercept swords sooner if you have tip control. Because when we're fighting right here, and I want to come in, I can do this. It's real simple, it's real easy, especially if I think he's going to throw a shot. I can just jut in like this until he throws a shot, rides off my sword, and then I can return. A really good setup and return, I guess what we should talk about next, is fighting hand-to-hand, like hand matching. I saw a lot of you guys pretty much fighting a dominant foot forward, which is fine if that's the way you want to do it, but you got to learn to use both hands harmoniously. My favorite setup and return is usually the fake here, out, in. Which ones are, you fight pretty much right foot forward?
I match my better.
So what's a good setup that you like to elicit a shot?
I just test hands at the beginning and see what they're going to do. When we're square, I'll just throw pot shots here and see what they want to throw. And if I find their hand's really twitching and they want to throw inside, I'll give it to them. And then just come in and then throw that way. It's a lot of outside, inside, outside, or inside, outside, inside, depending. And then I'll bring in some stutters and stuff. If I want to open up the inside, I might stutter out real quick, get them to try to throw in from here, and then I can throw whatever I want on that outside, using this hand to keep this passive protection. A lot of people, when they fight flow, they'll get in, and either they'll flurry, or they'll throw one shot and they'll completely forget about their defense. They'll just kind of leave this here and not really use it for much of anything. When I close, if I throw, and he's going to be throwing some sort of a shot, doesn't matter what it is, I want this one here, because I don't know what this one's going to do. He's probably going to throw some wide arc or whatever, especially if I'm pushing towards his lead side. I need to have something there to stop that. So if I have him on the inside here, he's on my inside, I need to watch out for that, and then I can push here, 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 whatever, and this will still cut off the angles from that one.
Sure.
His other arm's in the way.
And I like to call that transferring the block, because that happens a lot. Like, because whenever somebody swings to the inside sometimes, I'll block here and I'll step in and then transfer the block. That's all it really is. Getting stabbed sucks. We talked about it briefly here. I call this like open stance, like both of our chests are facing this way because we're leg matched, and then the lead hand is the danger hand because it's the closest hand. Whenever his chest is facing the same way as my chest, it's hard for me to get that stab. For one, stabbing is really hard in general whenever you're coming straight at a an angled body. The reason I call this a close stance, the reason this is easier to get stabbed is because our chests are facing different ways. So my sword comes in more perpendicular to his body. So it's a lot harder to move it off center. Instead, I stab here, but if he blocks, it comes in, basically. So The old way to defend against stabs was to move behind your sword. So whenever we're sitting here like this and he's going to stab me, instead of getting just straight up stabbed or moving the stab from there to there, people used to step with their back foot back to get away from their stabs. I do it sorta nowadays, but I don't usually rotate my back foot anymore. I find a good way to, if you're going to anticipate the stab, is to step kind of into it. Like, usually I'm not close stance, so is to step kind of into it, because like if you're blocking your stab from here, you got to move this whole transverse, your whole body to block it. If I want to block straight out, I can usually just stick my hand out and jam them, and that screws up their ankles.
Catch the stab early if you can.
Yeah. Especially with sword and borders, when they try to come under the sword, I will throw the shot like this with my pommel leading, and I can usually intercept the stab and still get a hit. One thing I saw a lot of you guys doing again was throwing the really wide shots. Find different partners than you fought before, and try to focus on keeping your hands in this little circle. A second thing with stabs is that if you're getting stabbed a lot and you don't want to get stabbed like from a pole arm or from other people, the best way to not get stabbed is not for them not to have the stab. So if you need to, like if you're fighting here normally and they've been stabbing you a lot, just close your hands. Now they can't stab you in the middle and they have to go to the outside, and blocking a stab to the outside is super easy. Because you don't have to move it across your body, you just have to move it away from your body. Partners.